Hello and welcome to the Celtic State of Mind Thursday Bullet. I've just been well informed that it's JP and not JP, so apologies to all the listeners that had some gritted teeth when I was mispronouncing his name the entirety of last week's Thursday show. But I'll talk about last week's show. The Brendan Rodgers, there was no confirmation, nothing confirmed. So we're just speaking through the minds of it's not confirmed, it probably is, but we still had the sort of how saga in the back of our minds, but we can speak with conviction now. Brendan Rodgers announced most of the question marks surrounding the appointment answered. The three coaching staff, Kuehl, Strachan and Kennedy, are all still there, and we know how long the contract's going to be as well. We spoke on the importance of continuity over the last sort of few weeks when you're trying to appoint a new manager, whether that be a style of football or just keeping the coaching staff there and having some key players there. And we've still got the coaching staff there. What do you think of the appointment, JP, and what do you think of maintaining the coaching staff as well?
Well, relieved that it's been announced, and I think I read something yesterday that is there going to be a press conference today? Is it
Friday at 4 p.m. Apparently that's what Twitter says, which you should probably never take Twitter as the complete truth, but I'm going to trust it for now.
Yeah. So at least, the announcement earlier on this week was what we'd all been kind of hoping for, and the continuity of keeping the coaching team, I think, is massive, because I was thinking about this yesterday. One of the things that was labelled that David Moyes, when he took over at Man United, was the fact that he didn't keep the same coaching team that had been there, and he brought in his own staff, and that's something that he's been criticised for and might have been a factor in the sort of transition period between Alex Ferguson and David Moyes. I mean, obviously, I'm not in any way comparing Sir Alex Ferguson and Postecoglou, but it's a similar kind of idea, in that if you've had a successful period of time at a club and there's coaching staff there that have got a relationship with the players already, why would you jettison them if they still wanted to be there and if they still had that good relationship with the players? And obviously there was all the rumours that Ange Postecoglou was going to take some of them to Spurs, and it's quite a strange twist of fate that it's Chris Davies that's now with him at Spurs. You couldn't really write that. If you rewind back about a month or something and told us that this is what was going to happen, and Enzo Maresca would be the Leicester City manager, you'd be like, wait a minute.
It's just a complete rotation. You wouldn't expect any of this to happen.
Yeah, it's like someone's just flung all the cards up in the air and they've landed at different places. So I'm really, really excited now, I have to say, about the season coming ahead, and just looking forward to seeing what changes are made, if any, and the recruitment, everything else like that. It is actually genuinely exciting to see. We know what Brendan Rodgers did the first time round, and we know that he's a really, really top level manager that's coming into a side that's just won the treble against according to them, they're a good side. So, I mean, we've just won the treble against them. So, I mean, they were in a Europa League final the season before. So, I said last week, I can't recall us ever going into a season with as much in our favour.
Yeah, it was a team that was apparently better than the Lisbon Lions as well. Some would have here, which a bit crazy that. But the thing that always excites me with a new manager coming in, it's the early stages are always so key. The pre-season friendlies last season, it was Andrew's second season. You weren't really paying attention, you weren't really over-analysing it. But here, you're going to see how far Brendan will veer away from Postecoglou's system. You're going to see which players he trusts. Will any youth players get an opportunity? We're going to come to that a bit later in the show. But there was some news yesterday, staying on the coaching staff. Gavin Strachan recently turned down an offer from England with a chance to become the Shrewsbury Town manager. I think that might be the second club from England to get in touch with Gavin Strachan. And we know John Kennedy's had some interest in the past from Hearts as well. So it shows the loyalty he has to the club as well. It can also be seen as a positive that other clubs want our number 2 and our number 3 coaches to come in and become their full-time manager. How much quality do you think there is in this Celtic coaching staff? Even the fact that a team like Spurs are trying to come and take them from us as well. It shows that we're going in the right direction.
Well, he's certainly never going to shake off the laptop slagging, and I think he's even sort of made a mockery of that himself. Was it not in one of the Christmas
advert?
Yeah. So I think the continuity thing and the fact that, well, look, my issue has always been in the past, like when Neil Lennon took over, and obviously I started doing this in sort of December 2020 with Paul. Probably one of the worst possible times that you could be coming on a live YouTube podcast to talk about Celtic and their current guy and their then current guys. And the criticism, I was trying to defend Neil Lennon in the fact that I didn't think that he got the choice to bring in his own people for that setup that he had at that particular time. There's been sort of murmurings that was the case. We don't know that for absolute fact. Maybe we'll never know. I don't know if there's confidentiality agreements being signed or anything like that. So I just don't know. But I got the feeling, and the things that I've heard, not in the know or anything like that, but just the things that I've read online and things like that would lead you to believe that maybe he did want to bring in his own people and was denied that opportunity. Whereas this time with Brendan Rodgers, you kind of get the feeling that there's no way that the club are turning around and saying no to him on anything. So if he wanted to bring other people in, I'm pretty sure that would have happened. I don't think they would have forced this current coaching staff on him. So he's obviously got the relationship with John Kennedy. Probably knows Gavin Strachan anyway. It's not as if the football community is small. He's obviously would have met him at some point. And even if he hasn't, I'm pretty sure he'll have asked John Kennedy his thoughts on Gavin Strachan, and he'll have given him a good report, hence why he's staying. Same with Harry Kewell. But like you said, all these guys probably are managers at some level within their own rights. So to have them as coaching staff is probably a pretty decent situation for Celtic because of the respect that they'll have amongst the players and the knowledge and expertise that they'll impart onto the players that are there. So like I've never ever had a problem with John Kennedy or Gavin Strachan per se with regards to being employed. It was just more a case of like, are they being forced upon managers that come in? But I think with this situation, as we know on numerous other aspects with regards to the job, be that recruitment and all the rest of it, there's no way that things are getting. I mean, people might be watching this being like, "Oh, you're so naive," and you don't know it works and everything else. But that's just my gut feeling as a supporter. I just don't think that there would be a situation created where we've not got, or that he's not got full autonomy on what's going on.
Yeah, the coaching staff have come on sort of leaps and bounds in recent years. When you look at how they were viewed by the fans during that 10-in-a-row attempted season, the fans, they wanted them gone as far away from Celtic Park as possible, never to be seen again. And now Celtic are fighting tooth and nail to keep them at the club. It shows that maybe we were a bit too harsh on them. We were lashing out at whatever there was out of anger. We've got Double Denim coming in here. I would have liked to see Scott Brown added to the coaching staff. I think if he's going to come to Celtic, it would be as a manager. He's already done his time as a coach in Aberdeen. He learned as Stephen Glass's number 2, and now he's moved into management himself. I don't see himself coming back and being sort of second fiddle. I think once he proves himself, he will come back and be Celtic manager one day. But I want to get on to what the tagline says. How much European progress can Brendan Rodgers make in 3 years? It's a 3-year contract, the plan of European ambition going into it. I want to sort of say, how do you want this 3 years to go? What if it was to go step by step, year by year? We could do an ideal scenario and then sort of a realistic scenario here. So first of all, how will the contract go? What do you think Celtic will be looking to do if it's a European plan, ambitions, step by step? Do you think it's third place in the first season? Perhaps second place in Champions League in the second season? And then what is the aims in that third season then, if that's the plan?
Well, Well, this is definitely something you need to be careful about talking about, because you could definitely be accused of getting ahead of yourself with this. Given how, I don't want to say how poor we've been, because when you've actually been at the games and you've lived through it, whether that's being at the home games, being at some of the away games, not being at all of them, of course, I'm not a millionaire, and or watching them on the TV. Either way, I've seen every minute of those European games in the last, few seasons, or not the last few seasons, the last 25 years. But I think it's easy for people who are just looking at the results or haven't watched the games to be like, oh, Celtic are terrible in Europe, and it's been embarrassing, and this, that, and the next thing. And I suppose I can't really blame people for doing that. However, when you've actually seen the minutiae of each game, you know that it's fine margins. And by the way, we spoke about Mudryk last week being the standout for Shakhtar, and that Shakhtar side. Nkunku's just signed for Chelsea for something like 52 million. So
yeah, season too late.
Yeah, did he not score against us as well? I'm pretty sure he did.
Yeah, he scored. I think he might have got a double away to Leipzig. He's a phenomenal player, though.
That's a very, very clear indication of the level of player that you're going up against in these Champions League group stages. One or two players in their team can make a difference to them. Just like had we had our players on form and maybe a fully fit team, because you can't go into these games with any sort of handicap, and losing Carter Vickers for those games was huge.
Callum McGregor away to Leipzig as well.
Yeah, so if we'd have had one of our players on song, we might have been the team that did the damage in those games, but it wasn't to be. But with regards to us going forward, I just I would be very hesitant to think about maybe getting second place in a Champions League group stage, because that's right now to us that's Mount Everest. And
I think that's step 3 of if this is a 3-year plan. Do you think that's step 3?
Well, it's step 3 if we finish second and go into the next round. And I mean, I have to admit, I have no idea really how this new Champions League thing is going to work when it gets expanded. Is it in 2 seasons' time?
I have absolutely no idea. My main question is, did the Champions League need a revamp in the first place? Was anybody dying to get a big change in format of the Champions League?
I mean, probably not, but the way that it's going and the way that it's kind of geared is that, like, the teams are finishing 3rd, 4th in the league, and then getting into the Champions League. So it's not really the Champions League anymore. It's not been for years.
It's been for years now.
I don't know how they can pull back on that and get back to it being. There's no way that's ever going to happen. I just can't see that happening. So I think if we finish second and then we're able to go into the next round with a realistic prospect of potentially, doing something against whoever we get, you don't want to just get there by a fluke or whatever and then draw a team and inevitably lose. You want to have the team strong enough and the squad strong enough to be able to cope with what lies beyond a group stage, because what lies beyond a group stage is ultimately a really top team, because you're going to be playing a team that's won their group. We're not going to be playing a minnow or anything like that. And yeah, sometimes you get the occasional outlier where a smaller club in Europe has won their Champions League group, but it's very rare. Like the standout team in those groups will usually absolutely romp the group and win, probably with a game to spare or something like that. So that would be the only thing, as if there's no point in us getting through as if we're just going to immediately capitulate against the next side we come up against, which is why the first step probably is to get into the Europa League and win that knockout tie, just to shut folk up about that, because we get abuse about that from all corners.
Even just getting over our own sort of self-doubt as well. You see, whenever Celtic can see a goal in a European game, it's never just one. they always come in sort of a bucket load of goals. It's always 2 or 3. And I think
Totally.
that's to do with the mindset. So once Celtic go over that hurdle, I think we could have a bit higher expectations of the team. But I think I mentioned on, I think it was the Tuesday show, how big of a factor is luck in that. Because when you look at the groups Celtic have had in sort of the last decade, you've had groups, you've had Barcelona and Man City in the same group. You've had PSG and Bayern Munich in the same group. I think it was the 2013 season we had, I think it was Barcelona, AC Milan and Ajax in the same group. We've not exactly had plain sailing. There's not really been a sort of easier group, if you want to say that, to allow us to potentially get over those sort of that European mindset, European hurdles that we've had before. How big a factor do you think luck is when you go into these group stages? Are you looking for the glamour ties, or are you looking for the easiest route you possibly can to sort of get the most success? Because you can't forget the finances that come with a win in the Champions League as well. You don't want to be there just to take part. You want to be actually winning games.
I think if I'm being selfish to answer that question, I've had my fill of glamour ties. I've seen us play. It's almost like, I don't know. It's almost like going to a different country. When you've been to a different country, you kind of go, right, okay, I've been there. Chances are, I might go back there at some point, but it's not going to be, high on my list because I want to go to somewhere else. So I've seen us play Barcelona. I've been to the Nou Camp. I've been to the Parc des Princes. I've been to the Bernabeu. So now I've kind of, all those teams we've played, I really now just want to potentially get a favourable draw. I mean, it would be nice to think that we could look at a group. I mean, people will argue last season that there are really, really hardline people that look at that group and go, we should have got out of that group, or we should have at least got third. And Shakhtar, we should have beat Shakhtar. Yeah, we should have beat Shakhtar, but the team were
both times.
Yeah, they were naive at that level, and maybe Postecoglou was naive as well at that level. And that's not having a go at him. It's just the fact that it was a new competition for him. He's not suddenly the best manager in Europe just because he's winning trebles or doubles or whatever. It's a huge leap.
Yeah, Brendan Rodgers won 2 trebles, and he still couldn't get us over those sort of European hurdles. I'm glad you mentioned the fine margins though, because it's always the little things Celtic get wrong, whether it's a big chance hits the post or what looks like a tap-in goes wide. It's an amazing save. And then it's the fine margins at the other end, at the defence. A misplaced pass, 9 times out of 10, Celtic are going to get punished. And we don't punish the opposition's mistakes.
And it goes back a long way. Baldi's handball against Lyon, that cost us qualification from the group stage that we would have qualified. And that was just daft. And like Magnus Hedman letting one in against Bayern Munich, we were 1-0 up. There's a load of examples that you can cast up, and unfortunately, a lot of the recent ones have resulted in absolute tankings where we've really sort of surrendered everything and just been absolutely battered from pillar to post. And that can happen, and it's happened to other teams. It's happened to better teams than Celtic. It's just a level of how you go about approaching these games and how you go about dealing with going a goal down and not collapsing and not conceding another one straight away as we like to do. But yeah, I think the plan in terms of 3 years, and as some friends of mine had a chat with them and they've been like, you'll just go when there's another job comes available, or he never. Brendan Rodgers, obviously, his tenure at Leicester ended, I guess, badly because he left, and then a couple of months later they were relegated. But I listened to the Huddle Breakdown podcast. They had a Leicester City expert or an analyst, whatever you want to call him, and he kind of described in detail what went on at Leicester. It's a really good listen if anybody's got a spare hour, and just describing the financial problems, the way that COVID hit Leicester, because the money that Leicester have is from duty free. So like there was in COVID, the duty free industry was and the money started to run out, and that obviously that can happen, and it led to them not being able to spend the level of money that Brendan Rodgers probably wanted to spend, and I guess he would
familiar story, isn't it?
He would be cognizant of the situation, so it's not as if he was going to be, toys out the pram and stamping his feet. It just, I suppose, it kind of made him look bad as a manager that he wasn't able to cope with that. But I go back, as some people have said, and I think I don't know if you said it with Kev on Monday, or Paul's definitely said it to somebody and said, "Do you think Brendan Rodgers would have won 10 in a row?" And then everyone's going 100%. He definitely would have. And I'm sorry, but I'm not entirely sure. Had all the things happened that happened to Neil Lennon happened to Brendan Rodgers, I don't know if he would have. I genuinely don't know if he would have. And some people will dispute that, but I just think that season was almost cursed. It was just everything that could go wrong did go wrong. There was no fans in the stadium. Everyone was in a really weird place at home, and Rangers got an advantage very, very early on in that season. And the idea, if you did before COVID came about, if you'd said, "Oh, Rangers are going to go about what did they go about 9-10 points clear because of all the games that we couldn't play." Remember, but the games were postponed because of Bolingoli, and we had like two weekends where we didn't play, and Rangers just kept winning.
There's a couple of games in hands that didn't help that we were dropping points as well. I think away to Kilmarnock, there was some drop points. And obviously, losing the first derby of the season didn't really help either. It's an interesting point you raised about Brendan Rodgers' final season at Leicester, because they didn't get the money he wanted to, which I said it was a familiar story because there's a striking resemblance to that at Celtic. He wasn't getting the players he wanted. So what did he do? He jumped ship. So it's an interesting point of Rodgers in the face of adversity, but we'll need to wait and see how he does with that then. We've got JJ Celtic weighing in here, third and do well in Europe. I'm sure a lot of fans would definitely take that. Danny Boy, the draw was kind to us last year. We just couldn't do the necessary. It's the fine margins, as we were mentioning. Double denim, definitely games we should have won last season in the Champions League. I would 100% agree with all of that. But we'll stay on the transfer talk there. We've got a 30 million kitty to play with, which means the rumours are flying in. We've already had this sort of crazy rumour, which was Wilfred Ndidi, which I'm sure even the Celtic fans would have shot that one down. There's no chance that one was going to happen. But there's now a midfielder who looks to be very much on the verge of joining the club. Odin Thiago Holm seems to be on his way from Vålerenga to side just outside the relegation zone in the Norwegian Elite Serie A. And he recently plays 90th in the Golden Boy Award. You're thinking 90th, surely that's not amazing, but it's the best under 21 players in Europe. And when you consider that footballers are only getting younger and younger, I think that's really good from young Odin. Seems a real prospect. If he's successful, he could have a real sell-on value for Celtic. Do you think that's got to be Celtic's direction in the transfer window? Are you more of a buy players looking at the upside in the future, or do you look at the short term, sign a more experienced, higher quality player for some instant guaranteed success?
Well, immediately I have a bit of a red flag about these lists that get compiled about top players in Europe, because I'm pretty sure if you were to go back maybe, I don't know, 5 or 6 years and look at that same list and then try and pick out how many of the players have actually gone on to, I'm sure they're all still playing football, but like what level they're playing at is to be to be questioned. So this guy coming in, it'll be a hit or a miss. He'll either be a Martin Odegaard or he'll be a Sonny Pike, and that's a very, very old school reference.
I have no idea who that is.
Well, Google Sonny Pike, but I'll tell you the little I know about him. He was a wee guy, I think he was English, and he signed for Ajax, and he was just a kid. It's
friggin' bells, man. It's friggin' bells. I've heard that story.
10 or 11, and he was on, like, there used to be God, it's a really old school reference. There used to be a Channel 4 programme called The Big Breakfast, and he was on as a guest with his dad on The Big Breakfast, and they had him doing keepy-uppies in the back garden of the Big Breakfast house. It was like Chris Evans. So
he's a bit like a Freddie Adu sort of thing.
Yeah, and it just never. I always kept an eye out and like hoped to see this fabled Sonny Pike playing for Ajax and maybe going on to bigger things, but it just never happened. And I think those players that have that kind of hype about them, even they themselves would probably get a bit wary of people talking about what they're going to do and how good they're going to be. I think it's a lot of pressure to put on a player at that age, and especially somebody coming from a sort of smallish club where he's probably the big fish in that pond, and then suddenly just say this transfer happens and he's at Celtic, he's going to be surrounded
Just another
by
name. Just another name.
Yeah, it's not a name, and he's going to be surrounded by people that are way advanced in terms of the football that they play. I mean,
especially in our midfield, it's
his first
Matt
training
O'Reilly's probably around 22. You've got Hatate 25, McGregor 29. There's a lot of it. He'll be one of the youngest players in amongst that squad. But you could look at Liel Abada. He got thrown in with the pressure on him. A sink or swim situation. He was one. I think he might have been Ange's first signing that really made an impact. But if he's going to be starter, I don't think he's going to be a starter though when he comes in.
No, but Abada didn't come with this fanfare of being like in a top, in like a list or anything like that.
Yeah.
Most people thought he was going to be a dud. I'm not a dud, but I don't think anybody really could have envisaged him with the goal return that he's had in the last 2 seasons. I think most people were like, oh, Dudu Dahan, coming from the Israeli league, like quite a bit of a fee that we're paying for him. Everyone has so much scepticism over Celtic signings, and because that was an early one, you've not got anything to base it against. So you're not going, all right, well, Kyogo's done well, Matt O'Reilly's done well, Dyson Maeda's done well, so we know we're on the right path. I personally, when Abada came in, just thought, oh, here we go. This guy's not going to do anything. It'll be a favour for the agent and one of those, and he's completely. Really, like, he has pushed himself into a top bracket of young players in Europe, surely with his goal return. But the only downside is he's not done it at European level. But maybe that's something that if he stays, Brendan Rodgers could get out of him.
I don't remember Abada really having a proper chance for us in the Champions League. I think it was Jota, and because we all know Dyson Maeda, the amount of chances he missed. So Dyson Maeda was definitely a starter in that Champions League team. At a lot of points. Barry McCormick coming in here, previous Golden Ball winners, Pedri, Gavi, Haaland, De Ligt. But then you've also got, on the other side, you have Mario Balotelli and Renato Sanchez are some previous winners whose careers haven't perhaps gone the way that people might have thought at the start. But the rumours, back to home, the rumours were going around on this deal before Rodgers was announced. And then the reports sort of calmed down for a bit. I was thinking maybe the talks had stalled. But do you think during that time the club would have been working on it in the background and then just waiting for Brendan's approval? Because I'm sure a lot of people are getting worries. They're harking back to Marion Shved about whether Rodgers is getting a say over the transfers. But I think he wouldn't have signed him if Rodgers didn't have the green light of this signing.
No, I think we're, like we said last week when we were speculating, I think we're in a different environment now to the one we were in the last year or 6 months of Brendan Rodgers' previous tenure. I don't think there's anything that could surely be going on that they would. Why would they want to cause any upset with someone who they've really pushed the boat out to get? I just think that would be insanity. So, with regards to the transfers, I mean, the things that you're hearing from here, there, and everywhere is that this Brendan Rodgers thing's been in the post for quite a while. Like, this hasn't just happened.
Perhaps even back to the semi-final, where he was at the Hampden semi-final against Rangers.
Yeah. I mean, that's obviously, that's guesswork, and everything's guesswork because nobody knows. Nobody knows for sure. I've not read anything. No one's told me anything for certain that that's the case. But I just think it didn't. The manager process or the manager hunt didn't just start the moment that Postecoglou left the door or left the building, should I say. This has definitely been in the pipeline for a while. So if there has been transfer dealings going on, I'm sure Brendan Rodgers has been kept abreast of them. But there was other rumours as well that Ange Postecoglou started playing after we won the league, started playing the squad team or the squad members so that Brendan Rodgers could get a look at them. I think that is a bit of a wild take. But
I think it's. I looked at it as just Ange want to give the players minutes because a lot of them have hardly featured because of the pressure that's on these players to win every single game, every single week. So when that pressure is relieved, you could think, right, this guy Bernabe, he's not really played much. You can throw him in with as little pressure on his shoulders as possible, and then you'll see how they do. Because you've got to remember that Cameron Carter-Vickers had picked up that injury as well. So it was also him testing and experimenting the waters to see who can I throw in to this cup final against Inverness to partner Carl Starfelt. And he eventually found his answer with Tomoki Iwata. But when I saw the home rumours coming up, I was a bit surprised that we were going to get another midfielder because I thought our midfield's already pretty stacked. But we've seen some social media rumours start to gather steam. There was some reports from Australia coming out regarding Aaron Moy, media outlet Football, acronym FTBL. I'm not a fan of that. But they say a well-placed source has told that Aaron Moy's been thinking about things over his future. Do you think retirement will be Aaron Moy's future very soon? He's 32. I think he's still got a part to play at Celtic. I mentioned before these rumours even really started, I think Aaron Moy with a full pre-season to get to full fitness for the start of the season could be a very interesting prospect. I think he's still got a part to play at Celtic, but it is all up to the player at the end of the day.
Well, you're a long time retired, aren't you? And most players will always sort of say, play as long as you can, because once you hang up the boots, there's no going back. And I don't know. Obviously, the dream, not the dream scenario, but a good scenario for a player is to bow out on a high. But like you say, when he's only 32, I suppose it just depends how his body is. Because did you not read as well that the Australian coach sort of said, I think it was just before he signed for Celtic, and he was like, "What's happening?" And then he said, "I need you for internationals." And Aaron Moy was like, "Oh, do you really need me?" As if like I don't know if I'm fit to play or even want to play.
Yeah, he missed Australia's most recent fixture against the world champions Argentina in a friendly. I think he might have been called up to the squad as well. So I think it might have been Moy voluntarily missing out on that fixture.
But is the injury that he's carrying right now not some sort of back injury?
Yeah, back injury.
So I guess obviously we don't know, but if a doctor's telling him you probably should, give your body a rest because this might do long-term damage. He doesn't want to play on for another season and put his body through that if it's going to cause him potentially long-term injury. You don't want to be, for the sake of one season, you don't want to end up with problems in later life. So I don't know. It's obviously a decision for him to make. I would certainly. I saw enough of him at his top form to see that he can still contribute if he was able to stay fit to Celtic, because he was absolutely outstanding in that period after the World Cup, and a huge factor in us winning the league, no doubt about it. And it was really great to see him turn a lot of the criticism on its head, because there's nothing better than seeing a player do that. A player that's been written off and deemed sort of not good enough to play for Celtic, and he clearly was, international.
Yeah, he'd been thrown into the sort of James McCarthy box of a kind of a laughing stock by some of the support. But it's good that he proved them wrong. I think it was the consistent minutes against high quality opposition at the World Cup that really sort of upped his game, because he was playing well at the World Cup. I think, I know that they got blown away by France in the end, Australia in that group game, but I remember for the first maybe 50 minutes, Moy was one of the best players in the park. He was absolutely phenomenal, and I think if he's going to be looking at his career, he's 32, if he's got these back problems, he'll be looking at his career thinking, I've just won a treble, I've played in the Champions League, played in the Premier League, I've taken my country to 3 World Cups. I think maybe the time might be now to hang up his career, but he's still definitely got a part to play. There's some other transfer news I want to get onto. It's just broke sort of this morning. It looks like we're sticking in the Asian market. Gangwon FC winner Yang Hyun Jun. I think I've got that right. The comments can correct me if I'm wrong here. They're near the relegation zone, much like Valerenga.
Nobody's going to James, don't worry.
Gangwon, they're near the relegation zone in the K-League. I think it's seem unwilling to part with them at this stage because the season in Korea, it's like the season in the J-League. It doesn't finish until around November, December time. So they're in a bit of a tricky position. They don't want to lose one of the best players, which is understandable. He's in the South Korea national squad, but he is uncapped, 21 years old, and he's already played 67 times, which I always think is a positive sign when you're looking at a young player. If they're around that 21 age and they've got lots of minutes under their belt, it would mean perhaps a more mature, level-headed mind on their shoulders, which is always a positive. Another positive is you see a team like Brentford interested, a team that's got a good scouting and transfer recruitment policy. If they're interested in a player, the chances are it's probably a hidden gem. But there's also the side that we are staying in this Asian market that's proven us so much success over the last 2 seasons. Would this be a signing you would be interested in, and Celtic staying in the Asian market? Is that something that you're happy to see?
Well, yeah, we spoke about that last week, and we were speculating as to whether it was somewhere that we would still look for players after the departure of Ange Postecoglou. And Ange Postecoglou, as far as I know, didn't have any personal experience of South Korea. So, I mean, we've obviously just been opened up to that market as a result of maybe agents that we've been dealing with in that neck of the woods, and they've said, "Oh, well, we deal with players in this league as well," and that's what's opened us up to that. And if so, great, because I mean, like I said last week, it would be silly to shut the door on these markets, because there's clearly players there that are good enough to play for us in base level in domestic football, and then obviously you want to develop them to be able to play at a higher level. And I don't think there's any doubt that most of the Japanese players, and O's still to prove himself in Europe because he's not had the opportunity yet, but those Japanese players, I think with another crack at it, could do the business in the Champions League. I mean, if Maeda stays, I cannot see a world where he doesn't have a good game for us in the Champions League. And exactly the same with Kyogo. Kyogo's scored enough goals for Celtic now to let you know that I think that if you look at it in this way, it's like in domestic games, Kyogo will get 5-6 chances and score one of them, or maybe even less chances. Score like he'll have 2 or 3 chances or score one of them, and that's it for the game. Whereas he's only had, how many bites of the cherry has he had at Champions League level?
I think Giakoumakis played a lot of the games. I think Giakoumakis started Real Madrid at home. He started Shakhtar at home.
Yeah,
I think Kyogo might have started Leipzig at home. That's just me. So I think Kyogo started Leipzig away as well.
So his sample size for that competition is really, really, really small. So you'd like to think that if Kyogo was to get, say, 5 out of the 6 games in the Champions League this season, he's going to score in one of those games. he's good enough to score. There's no way he's going through that campaign. If he's starting and he's getting chances, he'll score one of them, and that means that he becomes a Champions League goal scorer, which Giakoumakis became when he scored against Shakhtar, and no one can take that away from him. It might have only been 1 goal, but he scored at that level. And when once you break your duck at that level, I'm pretty sure Giakoumakis would have fancied himself to score again if he was still here this season. If he was going to be in the mix to play in the Champions League, I'd be like, well, I've done it once, I can do it again. I've not got that little seed of doubt in my mind. I can go for it. So, these markets are absolutely to be explored. And if Brentford are in from, the last time Brentford beat us to a player was Ivan Toney. So obviously he's had his issues, to say the least, but you know what Ivan Toney can do in that league. So if that is the level of player we're going for, then that's good with me.
The thing is, with Celtic looking at markets like this, another thing I like about it is the fact that these are nations that are on the rise. You've seen Japan and South Korea at the previous World Cup making progress and getting further than they have in sort of World Cups gone by. So if these nations have got players improving and the national team's going further, if we can get some of those younger players that are going to be some of the figureheads in that improving national team going forward, surely that can only speak good news for Celtic. But this is going to be a shameless segue here. Speaking of national teams on the rise, Callum McGregor scored for Scotland against Georgia on Tuesday night. He was asked fondly came about Rodgers' appointment. He says he really enjoyed working under him last time, and he also emphasised the importance of continuity as well. With Home coming in, who looks like a bit more of a six, do you think Callum McGregor going a bit further forward could be a prospect under Rodgers? Because that's where Rodgers liked him. That's where Rodgers improved and developed Callum McGregor's game in Rodgers' first stint at the club. Do you think there could be something similar?
And possibly, yeah. I don't know. I don't know if Callum McGregor would necessarily want to play somewhere different, or if he's happy playing where he is. I guess. I mean, we're talking about Moy retiring. I've got a feeling we're going to lose a midfielder. I don't know who it will be. I don't want it to happen. If we manage to get to the end of this transfer window, with all the midfielders that we have, i.e. O'Reilly, Hatate, Maeda, if you could class him as a midfielder, Jota. If we manage to get to September the 1st or whenever it shuts, with all those players, I'll be very happy. But I just have a feeling that of all the areas of the team that we might lose a player, it will be the midfield. So we'll see how the midfield shapes up come the first league game of the season. I strongly suspect Callum McGregor will be in his favoured position as the captain. I think that is his best place to play. As much as he can offer going forward, I love the way that he stays on top of the defence, receives the ball, and just gets the ball from defence and immediately looks round, and he's always just got that. The pitch is just mapped out for him, and he knows where to go forward. And he'll drive forward with the ball at times as well. But I think that me personally, I love seeing him in that position. So I don't know if anybody coming in is necessarily good enough. Certainly not a young player like the Norwegian to displace Callum McGregor in that role, because I think it's such a hugely important part of the way that we play. And I know that's a new manager and all the rest of it, but Brendan Rodgers has worked with Callum McGregor before, and I just don't know if he would. I mean, I might be wrong. I might be wrong. I mean, he might mix it up and change it up. But I just think Callum McGregor's like never really below an 8 out of 10 in that position. Never. So why would you want to potentially disrupt a performer who's performing at that level? I just think it would be maybe a bit folly to do that.
Yeah, I agree with you. Alan Robertson does as well. Cam better as a 6 in his pivot role. I think he's better playing in front of the defence. Definitely. He's so important in providing sort of security for our centre-backs as well. Especially those European games when there's so much pressure on the Celtic defence. There might be sort of more room for panic or more room for error. And he's just such a calm player in front of that defence. He's always available for a pass. No matter who's pressing him, no matter who surrounds him, he's always there. I think it's good for Starfelt as well, because he's a right-footed centre-back, playing on the left-hand side, not his natural position. So having Cal McGregor there, always there's the option for him. It's absolutely massive for him. We've got people weighing in the comments here. I wanted to touch on this sort of the last few shows, but I've not really had the chance. It's going to be a little bit of a quick-fire segment to sort of burn through here. We've got lots of players out on loan, a loan army, if you want to call it that, much like Chelsea had a few years ago. But it's not really young players with prospective future. It seems to be fringe players who've sort of been written off, but didn't have suitors to really sell them to on a permanent deal. So I'm going to rapid-fire run through a few of them here. I want you to give me a future or a no future, and maybe a reason why. First one I want to go for Liam Scales at Aberdeen.
I'm going to say no future at Celtic, but I certainly think that he's good enough to play in this league, and if Aberdeen want to keep him, I would be quite happy for him to get a move there, because I don't dislike Aberdeen as a football club. I think it's a good place to play, and if he is a good player for them, then it's always good for a win or a draw against them. Like, if you've got a good Aberdeen side, if that makes Aberdeen better as a side, then that's a positive, because let's face it, we need these other sides in Scotland to be strong. Otherwise, you just end up with, oh well, it's an easy 3 points for both Celtic and Rangers. It's just like, oh well, we're obviously going to win. I mean, you want to, you want to go to Pittodrie knowing that you're going to get a game. And I mean, by and large, we normally do get a game up there. There's this idea that they roll over against us and they don't roll over against Rangers. It's like, no, Aberdeen definitely want to beat Celtic when they play Celtic. There's no doubt about that. So yeah, I think Scales, yes, no future at Celtic. I just don't think he's good enough to get in that side. Who's he going to displace?
He had a tough period at Aberdeen when Goodwin was the manager, but every player was struggling at that point. As soon as Barry Robson comes in, a manager, he's got the team playing, he's got Liam Scales playing as well. I don't think his future is at Celtic. I think that Bodo Glimt away game has sort of scarred me from wanting to see Liam Scales in a Celtic shirt ever again. But at a sort of higher level in Scottish football, I think he could definitely do a job. I want to a player who seemed like had a future at Celtic at one point. He's on loan at Aruka last season. It's Ismaila Soro. What do you think of that? He was nailed on for a yellow card. That was perhaps one of the only positives you would get from Ismaila Soro.
Yeah, I mean, came into the Celtic team in that COVID season, and I guess he did okay alongside Turnbull when they were the only other options, and it was just a case of like, oh well, none of this midfield is working, so let's jettison everybody apart from Carl McGregor and bring in Soro and Turnbull. And I think purely because it was he was one of the players that was doing something different and didn't seem to be maybe one of the ones that wanted away, he was given a bit of a free pass by the support. And I was, at the time, I wasn't thinking this guy's the future or anything like that. I thought he was doing a decent enough job, but ultimately knew that he was way below the standard of player that we should be having in a Celtic midfield. When you think about Celtic midfields of years gone by, you know, Soro's not getting anywhere near the majority of Celtic midfields that have gone by. So again, you look at that side, where the hell is Soro going to play? You know, he'd be lucky to get a seat in the stand.
Do you remember he was linked with Spurs at one point?
Sure.
Do you remember that?
That was a real...
about halfway during the 10 in a row season, there was linked £6 million as Ismaila Soro to Spurs. Should have bit their hand off in hindsight. I want to move on to another player who you could maybe say is a bit of a bomb scare. I think we've not really seen enough of him. In fact, the Betis at home game, I thought this guy was one of the better players, if not the best on the park. Osaze Urhoghide, 22 years old, has been on loan at Ostend. I think it's his second spell there. I think he had in Ange's first season from January to around about May, had a spell there as well. But he got Ostend relegated, unfortunately for him. Do you think there's a future for him at Celtic, or do you think perhaps he's a bit sticking to his YouTube channel or something?
I'm not privy to what he spouts on his YouTube channel, but Urhoghide was one of those ones. But remember, he played in one of those pre-season friendlies in Ange Postecoglou's early time, and
I think it was a West Ham at home. Got beat 6-2.
No, it was one of the ones before, like the Celtic Park friendlies. We played in like a sort of amateur pitch down south. It was maybe against like Sheffield. It wasn't Sheffield Wednesday.
Yeah, we had, because I remember Karamoko Dembele took an absolute horror. I think it was Barnsley we played.
Is that when you got the bad tackle?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was that game, and people were like making their minds up about Urhoghide after that game, and you're like, I mean, that's a bit harsh. And then Bristol City.
It was Bristol City.
And then,
keep me correct.
but then I think to judge someone based on that was really harsh. I mean, he's a big boy, like solid. I just don't. I've not seen enough of him to playing at. I wouldn't necessarily say no future, but I don't know how much he's developed while he's been away. Has he become a more rounded player from having playing week in, week out? If indeed he did play week in, week out for Ostend. I think it's one of those ones where if he's 22 and that was the level he was playing at, can he really come back to Celtic and get a game? I mean, he's what? Is he predominantly a right back? He's a right back, right?
Right back, centre back. He sort of switches between the two. I think
Yeah.
there was a stumbling. He was supposed to move to Ostend last summer. The only thing that sort of stood in the way was the fee. They couldn't properly agree a fee from. They couldn't afford it, and we only wanted a couple $100,000 from him as well. So the fact that Andrew's trying to ship him off already after a season, I think it might tell you all you need to know about what Urigiri's future was like. Will Rodgers see something? I don't know, but we'll need to wait and see. Another player, a bit of a younger player. We've only really seen him in those pre-season friendlies, as you've mentioned. Johnny Kenny. He's impressed in the B team, scored a lot of goals, but then step up to the Championship with Queen's Park. Like he played about 12 or 13 games, 0 goals. He's been on loan to Shamrock Rovers from January to May. I was impressed with him in the sort of pre-season games, and for the B team as well. But the step up from the Lowland League to the Scottish Championship, if that's too far, then that might raise some question marks about the B team being in the Lowland League in the first place. But just on Johnny Kenny, have you seen much? And you think there could be any sort of future? Is there more time? He is only 20. Then again,
yeah. I don't really see a path for him. You've heard of these players before that come with, they've done really, really well when they're in their home league or whatever, and then they come to Celtic and it's the big dream move, but it's such a big ask of a player to come and be able to do the business at Celtic. It really is. It doesn't happen that often. That, put it this way, it would be one hell of a story if Johnny Kenny somehow managed to become a Celtic player, as in a regular first team starter who ended up getting 25 goals a season. I mean, that would be one of the modern day football and myths, obviously. In 50 to 100 years' time, people would be talking about Johnny Kenny. I saw Johnny Kenny play for Celtic. He remember him scoring an overhead kick against Rangers, and you're just like, obviously, the fantasist in you would want that to happen, but I can't see it.
Yeah, Marky, I agree with him. I thought it looked good pre-season last year, but those were against, I think it was non-league Austrian sides we were playing last year, so you can't really read too much into it. The next player, Albion Ayeti, we've seen a bit more of him compared to some of the players we've previously mentioned. At the start, his first few games, I think he had a better goals to games ratio. He had more goals than minutes. He made a really sort of positive impression, but then he got an injury, and then everything just sort of phased off from then. He hadn't looked the same since. He got thrust into the team again last season for the Real Betis away, I think a couple of other games where he looked like he could perhaps do something. Then injury strikes just like his first season. Now he's been on loan at Sturm Graz, where I've not really heard much. So I think that tells you all you need to know about a loan spell. If you're not hearing much about what the player's doing, chances are it's not going very well. Do you think there's a future for Ayeti at Celtic?
Unfortunately not. He's one of those players that I don't know, he's obviously forever going to be associated with that transfer window where, there was the 5 players' faces across the board, and it's just like, what a transfer window. And then you reflect back in it and go, was it though? I don't think it was. But there was something about him. I didn't see much of his interviews or anything like that, but I really, really wanted him to do well. I could tell that he'd had a rough time at West
It's the sort of player you would expect to do well. The sort of player we've seen do well at Celtic, players with a point to prove.
Yeah,
but he just hasn't proved it.
100%. He has been given the opportunity. I don't think you could say that he hasn't been given the opportunity. And whether it's injury that's prevented him doing anything, that's unfortunate if that is the case. But ultimately, time has moved on, and I think Celtic have, heavily moved on from Albion Ajeti and a signing from 3 years ago. 3 years ago, and in 3 years, how many appearances he's made for Celtic? I think that probably tells its own story, and in terms of his injuries and obviously his form. So I very much doubt Brendan Rodgers will be. He'll not be top of any pile for Brendan Rodgers. I think he'll be looking to, or he'll just say to the club, get what you can for him. Maybe did he sign surely didn't he sign a 5-year deal? Like I would hope that
I would hope not. I think it was 4. I think it would have been a 4-year deal.
He's got a season left on his deal. I think it'll be a case that we'll just probably pay it off. And it's a lot of money.
Be on decent wages as well, you would think, because they had come from the Premier League. He came from West Ham. So he would be on good wages there anyway. But I think a lot of the players we signed in that season, there was just a stigma that sort of lingered, as I mentioned earlier, with the coaching staff. You could even apply that to someone like David Turnbull, who hasn't really put much of a foot wrong, but there seems to be sort of people look down upon him like he isn't very good compared to a lot of other players, which he is a good player, he just doesn't get the minutes. I feel like it's a stigma from that season that's sort of stuck around and lingered. I want to get on to the next player. I think we could probably get this one over pretty quickly. Liam Shaw hasn't impressed our lone spell at Morecambe. Surely that says it all.
Aye. Those were a couple of odd transfers, weren't they? The Liam Shaw and Urhoghide came in.
Yeah.
At a time when we were in flux, weren't we? We were waiting to find out who the manager was going to be, and that they're not. We rightly applaud the recruitment under Ange Postecoglou, but did he have any say at all in those signings?
Not a chance.
I would say no. In which case, you can then say that the signings that were made from the moment that Postecoglou was there have pretty much by and large been successes.
I think they start with Kyogo. I think that's where it starts as an ad. I think Abada was still a Dudu Dahan link. It wasn't a hand-picked Ange players. You're seeing in the second season, Abada hasn't featured as much because the more Ange-suited players have been the ones in the team. So I think you could probably attribute that to being a Dahan signing. I think we could probably get a bit more discussion about this player, Mikey Johnson, was alone at Vitória de Guimarães. I watched that video, I think it was around February or March time, from someone who's an expert at the Portuguese league. And he says Mikey Johnson's just sort of been trundled along, just sort of a 6 out of 10, a bit like what he was perhaps about 2 years ago at Celtic, just a bit part player, not really many minutes, but he has been impressing for the Republic of Ireland national team, albeit against Latvia and Gibraltar, not exactly the most glamorous of opposition. But you think there's any sort of future for Mikey Johnson? I feel like he's 24 years old. A lot of people forget that. He's, 2-3 years older than Liel Abada. And then when you compare where they are in their development, so the only thing you could give Mikey Johnson is he's homegrown. So you want to have a bit more hope from him. But I think the writing's been on the wall for a bit of time now with Mikey Johnson.
Yeah, I think with Mikey Johnston, it definitely comes down to what Brendan Rodgers thinks of him, because Brendan Rodgers has obviously got massive experience with the player, and it was Brendan Rodgers. Did Brendan Rodgers play him up front at Ibrox? I'm sure he did.
That was Neil Lennon.
Was it Neil Lennon?
The 2-0 game before we had the cup final, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Rodgers had left, and it was Neil Lennon, and he just... I think, did he not play McGregor at left back in that game as well? Just a sort of hark back to what happened at Ibrox in the December, the 1-0 loss.
Yeah, I think the Mikey Johnson thing, that'll be a very quick yes or no from Brendan Rodgers. It's not a case of whether or not, I don't think it's a case of what he's done in the time that he's been away from the club. I think Brendan Rodgers will make his judgment on that player from his previous tenure. I highly doubt that he's going to take a 24-year-old guy back from loan and give him another opportunity. That may well happen, but I just don't see it. I think we should be looking to the future, and Mikey Johnson just seems like part of Celtic's past now, which is sad to say because obviously a Celtic fan and he's come through the system and everything else. But if he's 24, like
he's been spoke about as if he's an 18-year-old prodigy, an 18-year-old prospect for the last sort of 4 years. The years just keep going by. These years of potential development are just getting sort of left in the back. But that's our up. I didn't expect us to be finishing it off talking about Mikey Johnson, a rapid-fire Lone Army segment dragged out about 25 minutes. So thanks everybody for sticking around. 700 of you sticking through for the full hour. Be sure to like and subscribe if you have enjoyed the show. We'll be back tomorrow, Friday. But we have a few tickets are left for our Gordon Strachan show, a Celtic State of Mind's night with Gordon Strachan. I won't be hosting that. Paul will be back from Cancun very soon to host the night with Gordon Strachan. Tickets still available. You can find those down below. But thank you everybody for joining us, and we'll see you guys